Good evening, everybody. Welcome to an evening of ancestral wisdom and healing, exploring ancestral healing and wisdom. For those of you around Grandmother Earth, wherever you happen to be, welcome to the podcast this evening. And for those of you that would like to join us in the chat room is now open, and you are most welcome to join us in chat this evening. And as always, hey, Lily, it's good to have you in chat already. Thanks for leading the way. I'd like to introduce my dear friends, Nicole Fix and David Cad-Sturkin. Good evening, you two.
Good evening. Hello, everybody.
Good evening, everyone.
Well, last month when we were all together, I think I can speak for the three of us in saying that we're enjoying having the show. And I know that all of you are enjoying being on the listening end and the participating end. But we touched a little bit briefly last week about spirituality and customs and the fact that right now we're in a time of deep thought and consideration and reconsideration. And Del Marie, I know that you're wanting to join in here tonight, so I hope you'll make it into the chat room. Nicole, as a therapist, what sorts of changes are people going through right now?
I think, a lot of questioning values, questioning priorities, questioning, things that we've been taught versus like intuition. Just seeing people really, exploring themselves in a way for like a deeper healing, a deeper meaning.
That's big.
Yeah. And so it's just like this exploration process, because I don't even know if there's like a conclusion yet, right? And maybe there's never a conclusion really, right? We're always kind of evolving as people, but it's just a deeper exploration process.
Yeah.
And thank you for that, Nicole. And Cad, there you are at the hospital, and you're also a shaman. But in your role as a pediatric nurse practitioner, you come in contact with a lot of people. And I'm curious about something. When people, typically when they come to the hospital, there's a bit of anxiety and stress anyway. But are you seeing anything other than the usual stress and anxiety associated with coming to the hospital with your patients and perhaps their parents or their loved ones?
Oh, sure. I think one of the things that I think is happening kind of really across the nation is that people are afraid to come to hospitals now.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that is there's still that deep fear of COVID yet. And because, it's not gone away, and, we're still in this crisis. And so, yeah, there's that underlying idea that, am I going to get sick if I go to the hospital? I think one of the things we're trying to encourage people that, our environment is safe, but there is just still that underlying fear. And even as I've gone to appointments with my physicians and things like that, I've asked them, actually this week I was at the dentist and I said, so how are things? Because they just opened up like a month ago, and they said they still have not getting people to come in. So yeah, there's that. I think, there's just kind of still, and I wonder if Nicole would agree, this fearfulness that is this sitting, just sitting there, mm-hmm. that we are still, I think, across the nation, dealing with in many ways. It's interesting to me that in some ways people are acting like there's denial, but I'm just going to, do what I want to do, and doesn't matter to me what's going on around me. But I think the opposite is also true, that there are still a lot of people that are, pretty fearful about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I know that for some people, the question comes across their mind, or maybe it's a deep rooted question. And the question I've encountered with some of my clients and students is, where is God? Where is God gone?
Yeah, interesting.
And, now that many people still, for fear or what have you of COVID and all of the pandemic things going on, are not going perhaps to their particular worship center every weekend, um, and asking, well, where is God? And
Yeah.
is God in that church, in that ashram, in that temple? Because I've always been taught that we go there to worship God. Now, where am I supposed to do that? And where is God really? And what is God? Have you ever
Yeah.
encountered that in your practice as well, Nicole, with people who are kind of reevaluating maybe childhood ideas or childish ideas with regard to spirituality or religion?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of like, questioning, even some rejection of what has been taught. Um, yeah, and evaluating whether or not, what they've been taught or what's, you know, trying to kind of shape worldviews into a box that maybe no longer serves them.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So, yeah, it brings up a lot of, I think, I don't know, these questionings about spirituality and where is God and what is God, who is God, what is it, So, yeah.
And what about with you, Cad? I mean, sometimes you're dealing with people who are literally hanging there in the balance between life and death.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was driving to an appointment yesterday, and I was driving by this church, and out in front of the church, there was this sign that said, "The church is not this building," and gave their web address. And I think that's one of the things that we really um, kind of seen in this pandemic, is there's been this strong, sometimes idea that I have to be at church. I have to be at this building, and I'll be at this building um, whether the governor says I can or not, or the higher powers or the powers that be say I can or not. And yeah, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for us to really step back and think about what is our spirituality, and again, is it me needing to be in a building versus being with a group of people online. I think both are. I think the being online has been, it's kind of a great thing, and you can really touch a lot of people's lives through that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's challenging a lot of people to really just look at their lives and look at what is their spirituality, and who is it that they want to worship as a deity. And so, yeah, I think it's given us a lot of opportunity for reflection of this whole pandemic.
Catherine Harrison, Lady Hawk, is in the chat room. Hey, Lady Hawk. She is saying, I have a coworker that feels misplaced without her church building. I wonder if it's more the social aspect. And she said, Cad said it. Yeah, it's the social interaction for some people. It's community.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's community.
I think that's the one thing that I think that's one thing that really is coming out of this pandemic is we're really recognizing how important the people that we're recognizing how important people are to us. Mm-hmm. When you can't go to that building for 4 months, you can't be with your peeps. Mm-hmm. You can't be with your family. you start to think, and sometimes we think, oh my gosh, they're driving me crazy. But when you've been away from them for that a period of time, you realize, maybe those things weren't as important as works that they have or things. I saw my dad for the first time in 6 months this past weekend, and had lunch with him. I was a little bit weary to do that because of the fact that my exposure at the hospital, but I did the social distancing, I did the mask, and we sat and talked for 4 hours, and it was good for both of us. You realize how much that lack of connection really impacts you as an individual. We're meant to be, we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be in community with people. So,
Thank you for sharing that. It really is very trying for some people to not be able to be with, whether it's the church community or the friend community. Holly Hagen is saying, I know I sure do miss you guys a lot, and we miss her too. Nicole, as long as we're on this thread of thought, isolation, how does that affect us as human beings? As Cad said, we're meant to be with others. How does isolation impact us mentally or emotionally?
Right. It's a breeding ground for symptoms of depression. We are hardwired for relationships and for community and being together. And so whenever people are separated or isolated, it's very, it can definitely trigger symptoms of depression and despair and hopelessness. Suicidality, all kinds of mental health concerns that are, very prevalent already. And then you throw in this quarantine, and for people that might already be struggling, it's just, a breeding ground for more agony and suffering.
And then when you add the question, so where is God? Where did God go? Where did my guardian angels go? They have creeped out on me, and I don't know where they went. And exactly to Catherine's point, for some people, they've been taught perhaps that, God is in the brick and mortar or the sticks and bricks. And for me, with my clients recently, more and more of them have discovered the beauty of quiet contemplation on Sunday. And it doesn't, of course, take place of being in community and singing in the choir and all of those good, wonderful things that can happen. But finding that they can light a candle, they can do maybe a little incense, or maybe they can just have a really great walk outdoors and have a quiet conversation with God without a mediator in between. And for some people, that's a big revelation right now. But I think we can all agree that for our ancestors, that's the way that it was before there were sticks and bricks or bricks and mortar, was that there was communication with creation. How do you feel about that, Mr. Shaman?
It's interesting. One of the things, so my nationality is Dutch and Irish, and we often think of the Dutch as the Christian Reformed, the Reformed. So I actually had done a little research on, what were the pagan roots of the people in the and much of their roots in that time were they were very nature based. Trees were important to them. Water was important to them. The springs. They had various nature deities, elves, gnomes that they believed in, and then then the whole spirituality as well of Ireland. I mean, I do find it fascinating just how things dramatically changed as we saw Christianity move into many of these various countries and in the ancient times, and it's kind of like when the white people came to the United States. The Native Americans had to suppress what they believed, and couldn't do their ceremonies. They couldn't, practice what they believed, and so to me, I've used this time as trying to really understand where I came from and what were some of those beliefs, some of those ideas, some of those deities that maybe were important during ancient times to the people that I were my people. So.
And you've done really some amazing research, and I'm so blessed because you will text me what it is that you've read or what you've learned with the links. And because you and I share some of the same sorts of heritage, it's really been very enlightening to find out just how earth-based the ancestors were, and frankly, not that long ago, because people lived in tiny villages for a very long time around Grandmother Earth.
Yes.
And lived in very remote places where there wasn't a place to go, a center, if you will, but perhaps just a few people in a small, tiny village to get together and to be in community based on the seasons.
Yes.
Or the rising and the setting of the sun, or the cycles of the moon.
Yes.
And getting back in touch with nature, I think, is really something that's going on right now all around the world. What are you seeing in your world, Nicole?
Well, I'm just thinking of how getting back in tune with nature, right? Like if we look at our ancestry and even indigenous populations now, they are so in the rhythm of nature, and it affects everything from thinking about the moon and affecting the tides and women's menstrual cycles and more babies being born on a full moon, and how the seasons can be so symbolic of seasons of our life, and the directions and the four directions. And I just am thinking, for those of us that are more spiritually inclined, that to be able to share that with others is such a gift, because I think people are wanting to get back into that natural rhythm. Those the waking up of the ancestry is also the waking up of these old roots, right? So
I love that. I love that. Cad, to Nicole's point about getting outside and being outdoors, right now here in the States with the pandemic, we're told, go outside, get fresh air, be in the sunshine, be on Grandmother Earth. From your medical perspective, what is the value of being outdoors?
Yeah, it's interesting. If I could write prescriptions for my patients to spend, an hour a day out in the woods or something like that, I would. There's a lot of research in regard to the benefit of being around trees because they absorb a lot of the negative energies and things that we have accumulated over the course of time. The plants and the trees do that for us, and it actually. There's what I think it's called tree bathing that is really kind of big right now, where you go out in nature and you just really take advantage of that. And we are very nature starved, I think, as a culture and as a as a people. So many of us live in cities. We don't have the benefits oftentimes of just being with a tree or being out and taking those walks. I think it's imperative to our mental health, and I think especially now in this time during the pandemic, it's more important for us to be out in nature whenever we can, because of the fact that it just helps us. The trees help us, the plants help us. When I walk in the morning, I see baby bunnies. I listen to the bird songs. Those are things, we don't really oftentimes take time to listen to. And, it really, I think it helps me mentally.
Exactly.
So much symbolism. right? Just all the symbolism that we can take from nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in therapy, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but oftentimes in therapeutic protocols, nature is kind of sort of prescribed, right? Some time out in the sunshine, or just some fresh air to recenter and to rebalance.
Yeah, and I think they're finding like these microbes in the dirt, right, that are like natural antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
So gardening, and you know, we talk about the grounding, right, your feet on the earth, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it's that idea that you know, kids should play in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
We try and protect them from that, but it's actually being exposed to the dirt. As you said, Nicole, the microbes and stuff in the dirt actually can be helpful to children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They say that kids don't eat enough dirt. Like you know, it's like a prebiotic or something. It's really good for our gut health, not in major amounts, right? But
mud pie or something like that.
Yeah, mud pie residue, though, you're saying is okay when you're a kid.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, and think of how happy and joy-filled kids are, right? Playing outside all day long. Yeah, that's our natural tendency, and you know, we've lost sight of that in some ways, and I see this quarantine really bringing that back too, especially when we couldn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
People were just outside, and at least in my neighborhood, you know, getting outside, kids playing outside all day. Yeah.
Del Marie is in the chat room, and she's saying, yeah, we all need to promote being out there with nature and with grandmother earth. And Catherine is saying, laugh out loud, my boss and I had that very dirt conversation today. And Holly is sharing something interesting. She's saying, I had an acupuncturist tell me to go eat watermelon next to a river for my kidneys. What an enjoyable prescription.
Wow.
That sounds lovely.
It's interesting. I was actually thinking about Del Marie and Barbara actually over the last couple of days, and thinking about what it was like in ancient times for their people out there on the plains where there were no trees, and being in heat like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, you know, I have a hard. When Max and I walk, we go from tree to tree because it's like you know, into the shade and so hot, and I just, you know, it made me think about what they endured, what they endured to you know, just that extreme heat, and how did they do it? My gosh, I mean, yeah.
I was thinking that very same thing about my Congolese relatives.
Yeah.
And what it's still like for them today, even in the heat. But in the heat way back when, you know, what was that like? Or maybe the climate was different back then. To your point about this time that some of us have been given to do some investigation, because we've been given some quiet time, a little bit, some not so much. But in the quiet time, taking a minute to find out, so, you know, now perhaps I'm not called to the brick and mortar place of assembly. So what did my ancestors do? What was that like? And maybe that's why the call of the drum, you know, most indigenous tribes around the world have an affinity or an understanding of the medicine of the drum.
Yeah.
Or rattles, or chant, or song, or dance.
Yeah.
And I think that there has been a starvation of that in the West, a whole lot of starvation of that. And I think now is a wonderful opportunity to, okay, so before the Church of Rome made its way across and around and upside down and everywhere, what were people doing? What were the tribes of Israel doing back then? What were the tribes in the Congo or North America or South America. What were they doing in Norway? Kelly, what were your people doing in Norway?
Yeah.
What is their tradition? Sweden, the Celts, the French.
Yeah.
Nicole, what do you know about the antiquity of your bloodline spirituality?
Not much, and I would love to learn more, because what you're talking about, like I feel so called to like do certain things like dancing, singing, drumming, like that's got to be part of it, right? Something in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wanting to learn that.
I think that sometimes, or I feel that sometimes for a lot of people being here on Turtle Island, and for those of you that are outside of the United States, sometimes we refer to this piece of Creator's property as Turtle Island, the place of Native America, Native North America. And for those that have come here across the Great Pond, or however they got here, Native American spirituality and tradition strikes a chord within people who have forgotten or perhaps were never taught that many indigenous people celebrated and had ceremonies with drums and fire and sweating or herbs and all of those things. And so there's oftentimes a misnomer that only Native Americans have those practices. And theirs are, of course, very unique, but that there are those sorts of practices when you go still in some rural parts of various countries. And there's a resurgence of it in many places. But if we all go back far enough in our blood, in our bones, we find, aha, no wonder when I go to powwow and the drum begins, I cry.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, can you relate to that, both of you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think about that's the natural beat of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And it's kind of reawakening our connection to her, if we allow it to. I'd love to just go and lay on the sand on the beach and just feel the vibration of the land, or lay someplace, just in nature and just feel the vibration of the land. And again, I think we've lost that connection because of the fact that we're city folks now for most of us.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about how like as kind of there's this like awakening happening. So many of us in our bones, right, are being called more to this spirituality, and how if we use just that logic, rational mind, with ignoring that intuitive mind that's more emotionally based, that we can easily dismiss that yearning within us, right? So then when you're someplace magical, eating watermelon on the river, or hearing a native song, where it just wakes up within us, and how that's just so magical. And back to that desperation for it, thirstiness.
Del Marie is sharing something here. Let me put my glasses on. Thank you, Chue. I've been told by grandfather George Poor Thunder that the Lakotas were always learning about nature, watching animals, the weather, plants, and then their findings were shared in camps. Lots of storytelling or learning. I love that you brought up the storytelling, because that's also part of the ancestral spirituality, is the telling of the stories, the mythology, and sharing with one another what their experiences were.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love a good story, right?
Right. And that oral tradition. I think of the time that we were with Barbara at I don't like to call it Devil's Tower.
Bear Butte. We were at Bear Butte.
Yeah, Bear Butte. And all of us were just kind of sitting around, and she started to share stories. We've kind of lost that, as you said, the time, using that time to share our mythology, to share our, the stories of where we came from. So no, I loved just sitting there and hearing Barbara talk. I could have listened to her probably all night long. When Del Marie comes and shares stories, it's something that in our culture, I think, as Caucasian people, often we don't always see the benefits of that. We flip on a TV or something like that versus using that time to really, again, bond with our tribe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that since my grandson was born, I take time whenever I am with him to tell the stories.
Yeah.
And to share with him. And I know that even though he's only, he's an infant, I know that his soul is listening to me. He's hearing me. Hey, cousin Donna. I was just going to say a little something about you. It's good to have you in the chat room. Kelly Spencer is saying, as you've been discussing, their lives revolved around the seasons. Song was used, drum, large sticks were used to pound the ground and keep a beat. Song, music used in thanks for the harvest, for birth, tying of hands. Absolutely. Yep. That's right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my cousin Donna, as they say in Hawkinsville, Kang, is in the chat room, and Donna is a wonderful storyteller. And for me, I guess I'm kind of sort of the new kid on the block, only because I've just recently, a year and a half ago, met my biological family, but listening to her tell me the stories, and there's something about listening to her talk about my biological father or my grandmother, and to take me to their house there, what remains, and to listen to the stories and go to the tavern that my dad used to go to, and to hear her recount. It's not only a moment of learning, but there's something in our blood and our bones that's nourished by the stories, by the pounding of the sticks, by the songs and the welcoming of the child, the welcoming to adulthood, all of those kind of things. It's as though our soul, but our very blood and bones needs it for proper nourishment of the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, our emotions. How do you feel about that, Nicole? I mean, you're a therapist, and we're talking about the way that ancestral memory affects our wellness.
Right. I guess I'm just thinking about some of our basic needs as individuals, which is, back to that being hardwired for connection, that sense of belongingness. We would not stay alive if we didn't have a sense of belongingness. So, and so many people are so lonely for that. So, hearing the stories, understanding, those connections between us and our ancestors helps us find that belongingness, I think, that we just crave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But one of the things, too, I think, Nicole, that you brought up, which I think is an important point to make, is I think we, as a culture, spend a lot of time in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think and believe that a lot of this coming kind of to our own spiritual path is getting reconnected to that emotions, to our spirit. One of the things that I've been working on during this pandemic is I recognized that there have been events in my life that have been significant, but because I really didn't have time to deal with the emotions at that time, I just plunged onward and really didn't feel. What did it feel like? What did it, what emotions were attached with that particular situation? And I believe that, part of, I think part of really being a spiritual being is being very connected to our emotional
Mm-hmm.
part of who we are. One of the things I talk about with people is, the path that I've chosen is not separate from who I am. I am the path. And when I can engage the path on more than just an intellectual level, but make it about who I am as a emotional and spiritual being as well, it takes on a whole new, when I can feel it versus it just being a thought that's in my mind. I think that that's a very important part of my spiritual practices. What does it feel like to, be in this particular place? What does it feel like to, feel this particular situation in our lives? And so, to me, opening up our spirituality is really about getting connected with who we are as an emotional being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is tough for so many because, the way that I think so many people have lived, through traumas, and we can disconnect very easily from our feelings. Or when we're in survival mode, we shut down those emotional instincts. So, and trauma lives on through us and our feelings and our bodily sensations. So beginning to open that back up can really bring up the things that, it's important to be able to work through and to sit with, in a safe way, using, safe supports and things that are meaningful to you, because we can so easily separate and disconnect from. And I think we have a culture that is very significantly disconnected from and dismissed, shut down, repressed, suppressed, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think superstition. Some people would say some of the beliefs of our ancient ancestors were superstition. Superstition is more than just a thought. Superstition engages all of who you are. It engages you as a physical being, but also that spiritual part of you, that emotional part of you, because you have such a deep, you understand that belief in more than just a thought process. It becomes part of your daily life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, geez, we've got lots and lots of sharing going on in the chat room. Del Marie is sharing that she makes sure every day to honor, the four portions of her, the four rooms of her being, every day to keep her sanity. It's really good to be taking care of our interior castle. And Kelly Spencer is sharing, I'm so blessed to have had family storytellers. My husband was not raised that way. He feels really cheated, but we believe that it was just too hard to talk about. To the adults hung together, but children were to go find something to do. As we look into his ancestry, he struggled with the fact that he has no verbal knowledge. So I said we need a road trip to Africa. So Kevin, we can go visit our relatives in Africa and have some oral traditions, or bring a storyteller here to Michigan. That would be good too. Maybe Tandika would come here and do that. That would be great, wouldn't it, Kat?
Absolutely. She's a great person. Yeah.
Yeah, she's Zulu. She's a Zulu woman, and she's also a sun dancer at Leonard Crowdog's place. But she comes here from Zulu country. Her mother is Zulu. She's Zulu. So that would be really fantastic. And the piece that you're mentioning about superstition, I was just going to say something about the fact that there's a lot of superstition regarding who I am. The Church of Rome, the Catholic Church, refers to me as a sensitive, as a seer, but only after a series of tests. Okay. And so, but in indigenous country, I'm a seer. And sometimes I'll be in Sweat Lodge out on the reservation, and you've been with me when, the medicine man will say, seer. Denise, you're the seer. What do you see? But there's a lot of superstition around that's the work of the devil. And that's all about control, crowd control, right? To say that the gifts of the Spirit are the work of the devil, because there's no way of controlling that person who has that particular gift. But and for our ancestors, this was commonplace. That was probably a family line that had the seer or the sensitive, and everyone knew who in the family that was. And it was a huge, great relief for me when my Aunt Dot took me aside the first time that I met her a year ago. And she said, I want you to know that I believe in angels and I believe in spirits. And I know that we are visited by the people we love who have crossed over. And you come from a long line of people who understand this. And for me, that was music to my ears and peace to my heart.
Yeah.
And so living by vision and intuition was just something that was part and parcel of who we were, and for some of us, who we are. But some people still feel as though they have to fight for that.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just love that you're bringing this up, because that control that you're speaking of, back to these emotions, which it invokes shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just being who you are. Yes. And so like having to hide who you are. And so much of what I see coming up in addition to fear right now is this element of shame, of needing to heal that, and just healing from our roots. Like, you don't have to be ashamed of who you are. You don't have to be ashamed of having this beautiful intuition, which is such a gift, right? So
absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm. The other night it was last night. Well, late in the afternoon yesterday, I had this vision for my cousin Donna. And spirit, can sometimes be very insistent, as you both know.
Yep.
And spirit showed me a vision and something. I was given a task, a delightful task, but it was a task. It took me a few hours to complete this task. I finally completed it this morning. And by the way, I put it in the mail, Donna, this afternoon. So remember to open it up on the end that has the red heart drawn on it. But the idea that something was given to me in a vision, and I trust the vision enough to sit down, to pull all the parts together, to create the vision, and to follow through with sending it, that was not unheard of long ago. And oh, by the way, Kelly, I was going to type this, but I'm just going to say it because Kevin, I know that you're right there. I'm going to get a hold of Tandika and see if she will come here next year. She's a pretty amazing woman. And I think, Kevin, that it would really be good for your soul to meet Tandika.
And she does a lot of ancestral work, so that would be also very helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we're going to bring her here to the school and to the house, and you can visit, and it'll be good for your soul to touch Africa through her. But and just the ability sometime with the spirituality, it is in the land. So to have the soil.
Yes.
On my ancestral altar, I have red clay of Georgia. And it's there. And I have a Zulu bracelet that you remember Tandika gifted me.
Yep.
She looked at me and she said, you come from the Zulu people. And I said, I do come from the Zulu people. And she said, I have something for you. And that's on the ancestral altar. So even beadwork can be part of spirituality.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things you just brought up, which I think is to me, was very eye-opening, was stepping onto the soil of where our ancestors were from.
Yes.
When we went to Ireland, I remember that first day we lay in that stone circle. It was just, an amazing experience. Able to have the experience of touching the soil where your ancestors are from, I think can be a life-altering experience for people.
Is that how you felt when you went to France, Nicole?
Yeah, I had longed for it since I was a kid, and I had, like, my ancestry didn't show anything specific to France, but kind of the northwestern Europe, which includes part of France, and I have to believe there's something there. But yes, there was just like coming home in a way. It feels so familiar, and the culture was so reminiscent in many ways. So yeah, and my great grandparents on my father's side were from Hungary. So that's on my list too, and I just I'm so curious about it because they were immigrants and they were fleeing and were wealthier and could do that. And so I'm just curious that I imagine, especially in this quarantine, there's been kind of this war-like feeling in some ways.
Yes.
And I think it's activating a lot of memories historically for us through our ancestry. And so just to be able to kind of imagine, right, because and we've talked about this in other radio shows, just how, so much got lost coming over to this country from us ancestrally. So to be able to go back and just kind of sit with and imagine or, can be healing in and of itself.
Exactly. I find it interesting on my daddy's side, the King side of the family and the Pardue, it's pronounced Purdue right now, but it was Pardue. I've gone back and, that part of the King family line got to the Americas in the 1600s, the early 1600s. And so the family on the King side has been here on this land for 400 years. And that part of the King line that is Seminole and Cherokee has been here. But there is still, even going back past that 400-year mark, what I find interesting, for those of you that will do your ancestry, 23andMe did a really good job of showing, and Donna, you might find this interesting, on the paternal side of things, in the beginning of the King ancestry up until, I don't know, a few hundred years ago, everything was out of Africa and also off of the coast of Italy. And so we can think, because we're wearing a certain color skin or a certain color eyes, that we are predominantly this, that, or the other thing. But long, long ago, who were your people? And for the longest time, our people were Sardinian and African.
Yeah.
And when you look at the trade route of the Vikings, Skål, Kelly, your relatives, Kelly, swooped down into the Mediterranean and picked up mine, right? And brought them up to be Celtic. Into the Irish, Scottish territories. And of course, my Native American relatives were born out of the rock here in Turtle Island. But it's fascinating when you go back, because I find with people there are forms of spirituality that someone may be drawn to, and they cannot for the life of them figure out why. Sometimes the DNA is it goes back so far. And it has just been diversified in the last, 500 years. Yeah. That perhaps before the 500 years, there was a forgetfulness, but the soul remembers. And I think the one thing universally with spirituality that the soul remembers is our connection to Grandmother Earth.
Yep.
I love that. Share? Yes, please do, Ken.
Cool.
Something that is interesting to me when you're talking kind of about the spirituality, and I, as I've done some research, one of the things that was fascinating to me as a child was I was always fascinated at a very young age, preschool age, with Santa Claus. Of course, a lot of kids are, but I think my obsession was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. My sister made me a suit when I was probably 3 years old. I still have that suit. And through the years, I played Santa Claus in many hospitals, things like that. But the origins of that were go back to the Netherlands, Sinterklaas.
Yeah.
But Sinterklaas actually is a representation of Odin.
Oops.
He was actually the original Santa Claus. His seven-legged horse or his eight-legged horse, but yeah, it's amazing how, and it's just interesting to me. For some reason, it seems like I have this connection with, Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, and probably Odin in some ways. And so I have to believe that in many ways that is related to my ancestry. I wouldn't, growing up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I wouldn't really have had exposure to those things, but it seems like it's something so deep in my DNA that for some reason there's a connection to it.
Mm-hmm. I never knew that, Kat. I learned something new tonight, that Santa Claus goes back to Odin.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Kelly? Isn't it fascinating, you two, how when we really question why is it that we follow the path of a certain religion? Is it our choice that we're following this path? Is it something that the family expected? What are the roots of our religion? Because usually if you go to the root of a religion, you're going to find that the roots are very earth-based, very cosmic-based, or based on what we see above as well as what's happening below. It's fascinating. And in that, you begin to discover that, well, really, 600 years ago, my relative, or 800 years ago, they weren't sitting in a pew or whatever. It's fascinating to find the roots of the mythology. I mean, how do you feel about, Nicole, when people all of a sudden learn that their story is different than they were told? Either maybe it reconciles something within them, or maybe it disturbs them, because maybe they thought that they're like Kelly Spencer, who's like 150% Norwegian, like legit. They think that they're that, only they come to find out that maybe they are, I don't know, Celtic or Mediterranean or something, and people can be destroyed by the fact that they are not who they were told they were.
Yeah, it can really wreak havoc, and to try to integrate all that information and make sense of it can be, uprooting.
Yeah. I remember when my brother Don, who was adopted growing up, he was always told that he was German. And when he finally met his biological mother and biological father, and he found out that he's actually Scottish and British, 1000%.
Wow.
There was a mourning within him that he wasn't allowed to know that. And a sense of, I need to catch up on. And at the same time, and oh my God, that explains a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, back to healing the shame too. Like, how come, people had to hide who they were, and, people still have to do that in some ways, and right. And to be able to heal that, I was just seeing someone posted something that said, trauma in a family continues on until someone is ready to heal it. And I just think with information like that can just rock someone's world, rock our world. If you're willing to dive in and explore it, it can be healing and course altering in many ways.
Well, and as Dana said previously, one of the things I think that happened as Christianity spread through the globe was that it actually is a spiritual practice of separation. It separates. It clearly separates you from beliefs that might be outside of it, and so I think you know, when we've just been entrenched in the culture, or we have grown up in that, it's difficult to think outside of that. And and for some people, as I think Dana has said, it's not encouraged. And so to think outside that, to start exploring your roots and things like that can sometimes be a little distressing to family.
Yeah.
When you start to say, hey, I kind of like this ideas of that my ancestors had in relationship to this. So it can be difficult for a family which is very steeped in the beliefs of culture. So yeah.
Oh yeah. And especially if you're an adopted person. And there's this thing about being an adopted person when all of a sudden who you were told that you were, whether it was for whatever reason you were being told that you were one thing or another, the story of your life, and your soul feels another way, and the day comes when you come to understand who it is in your blood and your bones. It is a day that is breathtaking, angering, and liberating.
Yeah, exciting in many ways, yeah.
Exciting, absolutely. Yeah. When people say to me, oh my God, all of you king girls look alike, and we do. I mean, come on, Donna, we do. We all look alike. There's a very strong gene pool on that side of the table there. For me, I'm like a kid in a candy store, because for the first time I've got all these faces that look like me. And Todd's back here chuckling. It's like, oh my God, they look like me. They sound like me. And Donna and I have a lot of mannerisms that are alike, which just cracks me up, and love of music, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden you recognize a thread.
Yeah.
And it's you being reflected back to you. And I think that thread goes back ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And when we feel it, whether we feel it because we're looking at faces for the first time that look like our faces, or we're with Del Marie and Barbara and we're at ceremony at Arvo's place, or where have you, and we're in the ceremony, the ancestral blood says, here we are, oh my God, I recognize this. There's a soul recognition, and there's so much peace in the soul recognition. And then you add soul family. Donna was commenting that she cannot imagine growing up not knowing biological family, but that she also said, but you grew up with family that loved you. And I do. I mean, I have you, Nicole, people in the chat room, people out there listening. There's family of the soul.
Sure.
And there's just a deep recognition that gets down to the soul of things. And when you extrapolate that further into the practice of spirituality, not religion, but the practice of spirituality, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Donna's saying, was it scary too? It was a little bit scary. I was overwhelmed. I was glad the first time that I saw them there at the Opera House in Hawkinsville that, Todd was standing there, because I was overwhelmed looking around that room and seeing my face and feeling my people. And this might sound odd, but actually smelling them. There's a scent and there's a knowing. And for me, it was like, welcome to the world. It was another form of baptism that day. Yeah. I mean, Kat, how was it for you when you finally found out that you were who you were and you could get to the root of it?
Yeah, what you just explained was exactly my experience when I went to Chicago before I actually met my biological mother, but to meet a lot of my cousins and aunts and uncles. They had a brunch for me on a Sunday, and we went, and there was probably 20 people there. It was very overwhelming, very, because, and I almost had to go into the bathroom and cry, because as you said, there's that kind of that knowing that suddenly is there, and a connection that is there. So yeah, it was overwhelming for me as well. They were all kind and wonderful and things, but it just, I think, and even when I met my biological mother and my half brothers and sisters, there was probably, probably about 15 people there at that event as well. And yeah, it would have been, I felt like maybe if I had met them in smaller groups, it would have been a little bit easier, because it was a little bit overwhelming for me emotionally.
Yeah. I remember seeing my cousin Corey for the first time. I flew to Florida, and she's my mother's first cousin. And I remember stepping off the plane and coming down the ramp and seeing her beautiful strawberry blonde hair and her big green eyes. And I thought, oh my God, that's where Elise gets her hair. That's where Elise gets her hair. And for, most people, that's just kind of, well, yeah, she looks like so-and-so or he looks like so-and-so. But when you're an adopted person and you see the faces for the first time and you get to touch them and feel the ancestors through them, it's life altering. And then when you have an elder in the family, and for me, too, my Aunt Gwen and my Aunt Dot, to sit and listen to them tell the stories, what they remember about my dad. My dad was a hellraiser. I'm just going to say that. Billy King was a hellraiser. And the women loved Billy King, and I think Billy King probably loved some women, including my mama. But to listen to the stories, good, bad, or indifferent, it changes the course of life. And when Aunt Dot said to me, darling, she took my hand, darling, I want you to understand that I believe in witchcraft, and I believe in angels, and I believe in spirituality, and I believe that spirits visit us, and I believe that they visit us in our dreams. I believe all that. And now all these cousins of yours, they've told me who you are because they've been watching you on Facebook. Right? But she affirmed who I am in my spirituality.
So welcoming, too.
Very welcoming. And, so she probably was a hellraiser, too, I'm guessing, because she still kind of sort of is in her glamorous Southern way.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that I was so looking forward to this evening is because we have wonderful opportunity now to really trace back our ancestral roots and the root of their connection to the Creator. And that's pretty doggone spectacular. And I think that when we connect to that we become, I love how Del Marie uses, the 4 portions of her soul. I think when we connect to the spirituality of our people, we connect and fill some holes. And maybe there's a little less depression or anxiety or a sense of not belonging or that shame that you're talking about, Nicole. What benefits do you see, Nicole, for your patients and clients in really discovering the roots of their spirituality?
Yeah, I think a lot of that sense of belongingness, meaning, purpose, connection, things that are really instrumental in us just, feeling like, not just that we belong with others, but that we belong here on earth, like that we belong that there is a purpose there. We do matter. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Kat? I mean, how do you feel about, you know, urging people or maybe sharing with them that finding out about their spiritual ancestry is a good thing? Why is it a good thing?
Oh, it's been an extraordinary journey for me. I think to connect with um, who you are at a DNA level, I feel like is very important. And then being able to, whether it's just maybe understanding where I came from. So I came from Ireland, I came from the Netherlands, and for some people, it may be enough. But then also going, it's been fun to go back and look at. So the way I do it is I look at what was the pagan culture like prior to Christianity in these countries, and it's a beautiful. One of the things I really like is that a lot of the countries, first of all, had polytheism, but as well as many of the main deities were goddesses.
Yeah.
It was a very, very nurturing, very an environment in which you felt cared for, and it wasn't the god in the sky type thing, but it was a relational. I mean, I think there's a relational part with the god in the sky, but I think people felt more like these goddesses, these gods were right there with them as they were experiencing their everyday stuff. They weren't separate from them necessarily, but they could be connected with them on a real regular. So I think it's helped me in my connection to my spirituality, I think.
I love that. And cousin Donna is saying, please let your listeners know also that you were a surprise from the most beloved of those 6 king men. A dream. Yeah, it seems as though everybody loved that Hellraiser Billy King. Thank you for sharing that, Donna.
No denying you're related to him.
I know, he couldn't deny me if he wanted to. He could try, but it wouldn't work very well. Good Lord. Yeah, so what a blessing that we're in a time to be able to tap back into time, to go, to be able to discover, for Kelly, who's 97% Swedish or Norwegian and 3% Swedish, she's got a little bit of Viking ancestry there. I love that. And now she can go investigate the roots of Santa Claus as they pertain to Woden or Odin, and understand how mythology grows over time. It morphs to suit the, what do you call it, Del? The dominant society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so dominant society has taken what our ancestors were practicing and made it their own. I remember the first time that I went to England and I found out that most of the cathedrals were built on pagan ceremonial grounds. Boy, there was an eye-opener. Right? And then when I found out that churches and cathedrals have the bones of saints, the relics of the saints under the altar, I was like, dang, okay. This is kind of cool. I want to know more about that, which leads you down a rabbit hole of wonder and questioning.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are out there listening, I have posted Nicole Fix's website. Should you feel as though maybe, you're having maybe a tough time right now in this pandemic. And she is a licensed therapist here in the state of Michigan. And so I've listed that. And she's an astounding human being and healer, as is Cad. And I just want to say that I really do mean this with all sincerity. I want to thank everybody who's listening and who's in the chat room for being part of, you're now part of my ancestry, right? You're now part of my blood and bones because you're part of the memories and the experiences contained within my blood and bones that have been passed on to my children and to Easton, and eventually to Easton's children. Last word for you tonight, Nicole.
Oh, I'm just thinking, the time is now. If you're curious to delve into it, delve into your ancestry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Cad, what say you?
Wow. Well, I just think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to expand who we are by learning about where we came from, and it only makes us bigger and allows us to grow.
I love that. With that, everyone, blessings be. Have a beautiful evening. And you know what I'm going to say, get out there and shine as only you can shine out in this world, because the world needs you. And the world needs your star shine. It needs your soul shine. So get out there and do that. With that, everybody, good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you happen to be. Until next month. Good night, David. Good night, Cad.
Good night.
Good night.